in a healthy relationship, of course, it ends, you're sad, you may even feel like devastated, but you also feel intact. In a relationship that is sort of like hooked into your blood supply or carving something out of you, when it is removed, you also feel this deficit in terms of self. And I think that that can be really hard because you're now dealing with these holes in yourself that this other person carved out for to have this dependent type of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be really intense.
Yeah. A question that I know I've asked before in some sessions where we might be unpacking some relationship dynamics is, what are you left with? Sometimes I think that hole analogy that you're using, holes in your body, definitely comes up for some folks. I've heard responses where it's like, well, there's these like empty spaces that I don't know what to fill with now.
Welcome to My Therapist is Out. Each episode, we talk with a therapist from Open Space Therapy Collective or LGBT community members about mental health and building community. This week, your hosts are OSTC therapist Allison Smith, she, they, and Ernesto Martinez, he, they, ea. Allison is a licensed therapist who specializes in integrating trauma-informed abolitionist frameworks to support clients in exploring identity, relationships, and cultural connections. Ernesto is an associate therapist who specializes in working with adults, teens, parents of gender-expansive children, and adult children of immigrants to transform challenges into stepping stones towards self-compassion, fulfillment, and confidence.
As we dive into today's topic, please keep in mind that this is a mental health podcast. We will talk about sensitive and difficult issues that are not appropriate for all audiences. Please take care while listening.
Welcome to My Therapist is Out. My name is Allison Smith, she, they, and I am a licensed clinical social worker here with...
My name is Ernesto Martinez, pronouns he, they, él, ella, and I am an AMFT and APCC therapist here at Open Space Therapy Collective.
Welcome. How are we doing today?
We're doing pretty solid. I'm ready to talk about toxicity.
Yeah, toxic relationships.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about it a lot.
Yes, we do. Today's big question is, what does toxic actually mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you know if you're in a healthy relationship or an unhealthy one?
Yes, big questions that we're going to tackle.
This is based off the episode, Can I Have Healthy Relationships If I've Only Seen Toxic Ones? I think we had an introduction by Tara Friedman. If you're looking for other episodes on this topic, we also have episode 25, Why is My Queer Relationship Mirroring Heterodynamics, with Renee and Kristen.
Yeah, we're probably going to touch on stuff that was talked in that episode. I'm looking forward to diving in with you, Allie.
Mm-hmm. Yay! This is our first episode together, so get ready.
Yes, and we are yappers, so just get ready. Should we begin where, like, what comes up for you when you are thinking about our topic today? So, in my words, in my brain, I'm just thinking about, what does toxic actually mean? My brain, like, zeroes into the word toxic.
Yeah.
In the Britney Spears way, but just in the way that it's talked about now out in the ethos.
Although Britney Spears has had several toxic relationships, so she would know.
Yeah.
It doesn't just mean matching denim. It's more than that.
Mm-hmm. Although that is coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah, what comes up for you around thinking about the word toxic?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like to some extent these sort of become buzzwords, right? Like everyone's a narcissist, every relationship's toxic. But at the same time, there are a lot of like real fundamentals, I think, that people are referencing, even when they're applying it to more situations, you know? I think about relationships in which it's not great for your nervous system. You're reenacting something that doesn't work. You're seeking something that you're not getting. Maybe something that feels a lot more like anxiety than it feels like love. And I think if we've only ever had the two together, how would you know what excitement or joy or attachment would feel like when you're not dealing with like confusion and inconsistency and stress, which are really, really potent things that make us like very driven and attached often.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm loving I'm loving where your thoughts are going right here. Just because I think for me, when I hear the word toxic in the way that it's talked about right now, that might like bring up certain definitions for different people. What I'm really wanting is to find some common language here. I think some common language around
Mm,
what we mean in toxic dynamics, relationships, family members. The list can go on and on. Not to police
yeah,
the language here, but just to get on
sure.
the same page of what do we mean by this? And like the term same side, no, two sides of the same coin, to
Hmm.
potentially not dilute from the importance of maybe what we're trying to say here, dynamics of power,
Sure.
control, abuse, and also how
Hmm.
maybe toxic as a stand-in word for all these things might take away from like really growing some kind of discernment on what true harm is versus just
Mm,
general uncomfort.
yeah. Yeah, because some things are unpleasant and then some stuff is like alters the gravitational field of your life and has a lot of big serious consequences, risks, all kinds of stuff that happens when we open our hearts to somebody. I'm thinking about what you're saying. It's making me think of people wanting to have boundaries around everything, right? And to
Mhm.
some extent that can get overused in the sense that sometimes being in a relationship with people does mean being annoyed and inconvenienced, right? That sort of is part of community. But then what is just the difficulty of the work and labor of love and community and care, and when does that cross over into pain and harm and like you're saying, uneven power dynamics in which, like, why is this love hurting rather than just having the struggles that are naturally a part of it?
Mhm. Yeah. Yes. I'm hearing us like get into the definition here. Um, right now, if it's like a living definition. We're like sussing it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Really taking in all these points that you're pointing out, and I'm on board. I'm also thinking about how, like, in that last piece that I'm talking about, just general difference between something like true harm or being uncomfort. Um, how maybe part of this definition too is getting a little bit clear on okay, then what does having conflict mean versus
Mm-hmm.
disagreeing versus
Mm-hmm.
moments where we're talking but language isn't perfect. How is that different from a pattern of behaviors which consistently puts us in harm's way? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
puts our experiences aside. To me,
Mm.
it makes sense that those things are different.
I think some of it too comes down to power. Right? I mean, there are things that we can do when we're on equal footing. There are things that we can do in good faith. There are ways that we can disagree with somebody or they don't meet our needs or they don't want to meet us where we're at. That is very different when we get to some of these things like the love bombing, the gaslight, right? Some of these things are designed to create imbalance between the partnership. And not just in like one of us always does the garbage and the other one doesn't, because relationships always are going to have sort of zones where they're not perfectly equal, but who has like more leverage and is are your needs, do they really matter and are they respected even if they can't be met? Like, do they have some weight, some value?
Yeah, I see where you're going with this. I'm also thinking about like outside of like maybe romantic relationships and like friendships too, which I know you're not excluding in what
Mhm.
you're saying here, but then just like even getting to know people. Sometimes I'm hearing this term toxic being like, that person is so toxic. And I just want to normalize that not liking someone all the time is normal in friendships, in relationships that are a little bit
Mhm.
more intimate. And also that not everyone is for everyone. Not everyone's going to be for you. And so then, like, when we're maybe just getting curious on when we're trying to stand in toxic for something, like where it's this person isn't, this ain't for me.
I'm hearing what you're saying, and it's making me think about like this question of sort of accountability, right? Because if we say that person is toxic, what we're not saying is I don't like them. I don't really like how they are. How they are doesn't really feel good to me, right? It doesn't feel good to my nervous system. This is just not something I'm interested in. But you would have to own that I am the one that doesn't like them, right? I'm owning this rejection. Instead of saying, like, there is this solid fact that that person is a certain thing or a certain way, and no one would ever be able to do it. Right. There are people that I don't jive with, but there's kind of a pot for every lid, right? Like, but instead of maybe owning, I don't know. This person's too sporadic for me. They're too whatever. Uh, it's like they are just. It's on them, actually. You know.
Mhm. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I like that analogy. That lid pot
Mhm.
analogy. That really clicked for a little bit. My
I mean,
brother,
there does seem to be, right? Like we find so many people in this world where it's like, how did you find like your someone that matches you? Whether that's friends, whether that's lovers, whatever that is, or it's like, okay, like in this very niche, you found your niche person.
yeah, totally. Yeah. Huh. No, now I'm kind of like diving into like what do I see or how do I see this showing up for my clients too, where we're kind of talking about these
Mm.
topics. Um,
Hmm.
and relationships are things that we talk about in therapy all the time. Yeah. How do you see this showing up for clients or, through like different lenses that you might talk about some of this stuff?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I do think that there is sometimes that struggle again to own that I am not just trying to impress someone else, but I'm also evaluating them and owning that I have the not just the right also to judge whether I think someone's a good fit for me. I think a lot of times folks get into relationships wanting to please, wanting to be adequate. It's like as if they're interviewing and it's one way when really it's both people are evaluating and you have a right to feel strongly. But I think also when we are dealing with a lot of these like relationships in which there is abuse and other things, there is often also a lot of like confusion, disorientation, downplaying. And so we're on the one hand not wanting to necessarily overuse these terms to describe things in which maybe these are normal parts of life or you just don't like someone, and at the same time address the fact that for a lot of people where this is the case, uh they f- because gaslighting and invalidating is such like a core piece of something like that where you kind of lose your own evaluation ability, that they feel like they're exaggerating or they're saying too much or it shouldn't be a big deal or they should be able to handle it, when in fact like it can often be really quite pervasive and you can still feel like, oh, this maybe doesn't count or my feelings are not as important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How
Totally.
about you?
Yeah, no, I mean, like, um, on the same wavelength as that, like, my brain codes that as like, okay, yeah, self-esteem stuff comes up, trust stuff comes
Mhm.
up, not just like trusting other people, but like trusting themselves too, and this
Yes.
minimizing effect, so like trying to minimize my feelings,
Yeah.
or minimize other people's feelings too. It's
Sure.
it's part of the things that I sometimes see. Um, yeah, and it kind of folds into, for some folks who might be really wanting to explore like a history of relationships that are coded with power, control, and abuse. It's also
Mhm.
finding ways to live outside of what could have been wrapped up in like a survival way of living in that
Right.
relationship, making sense and finding meaning after leaving
Mhm.
a a relationship or an environment where there's a lot of power and control.
Mm-hmm. And it's hard because not only is leaving a particularly dangerous time, but there is also all of the damage that this person called and the reliance that they caused. And so, what I find, I mean, a thought that I have sometimes when I'm thinking about this, right? Like in a healthy relationship, of course, it ends. You're sad. You may even feel like devastated, but you also feel intact, right?
Mm,
In a certain way. It is you that is feeling sad. In a relationship that is sort of like hooked into your blood supply or carving something out of you, that when it is removed, you also feel this deficit in terms of self and not just in terms of like the loss of this other person. And I
mhm,
think that that can be really hard because you're now dealing with these holes in yourself that this other person carved out for to have this dependent type of relationship,
mhm,
and that can be really intense. If you have been constantly told not to listen to what you're saying and to rely on this other person, or that you don't communicate well, or you're being put down in all of these ways, and now you're only left with this thing that you've devalued, that is really hard to try to fill back in.
totally. Yeah. Yes, immediately, something a question that I know I've asked before in some sessions where we might be unpacking some relationship dynamics is, especially like childhood dynamics, is, well, what did that
Mm,
experience leave you with? What are you left with? Sometimes I think that whole analogy that you're using,
mm.
holes in your body, definitely comes up for some folks. I've heard responses where it's like, well, there's these like empty spaces that I don't know what to fill with now.
Mm.
And that can
My
be,
sense of purpose
mm,
was to try to
that part. Mhm.
please this person who's impossible to please, right? And so then I also always had that. But now what am I supposed to do?
Yeah. And so that kind of folds into this idea of survival mode stuff, finding ways, making meaning, coming out of survival mode, especially if a lot of your experience was wrapped up in being in that mode. Finding something new, exploring something new, it's going to take some time here. I feel like this here is such an, like, I want to just hold it for a little bit because I'm like, this is why coding something as just toxic is a big disservice. We lose a lot of the important information if we're just coding things as toxic. Um, Getting clear on what we mean here by toxic dynamics or experiences is part of the work in finding something different, something that feels better.
Yeah. And what would feel better, I think, is a big question.
Hmm.
Because again, it can be very motivating to be feeling very anxious and very jealous and very stressed and very there's always sort of something activating going on. There's a crisis all the time, right? Then it rolls into the next crisis, and everything's very important and everything's very big. And this may also relieve us from having to sit with our own thoughts, right? We have this important job to do, regulating this other person,
Yeah,
trying to save this broken thing.
yeah, totally.
But what is something if you're just intact and you're not anxious and there is security? Would that feel interesting enough? Would it feel exciting enough? How do we get to a place where it does, where your life feels full enough that there's room for that?
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I hear your thoughts like segueing into maybe some stuff that we can talk about here because I'm thinking about like what would feel good or better.
Mm,
Also different for different people. And I know that here at
mhm.
Open Space, we work with folks from a lot of different backgrounds, different identities. We're talking queer folks. We're talking BIPOC folks, folks that live with disabilities, folks in the
Mhm.
immigrant community, children of immigrants. And so, like, we're also considering that there's no one right way to be good, healed, better, or find something
Totally.
better. It's we're also in the work that we do. It's
Yeah.
also considering, okay, well, what else from your background feels like it's still relevant. This kind of choose around, yes, maybe my experiences were really eclipsed by trauma. And at the same time, there's still parts of my culture that I still gravitate towards. So I want that to be part of what feels good or better going forward.
Yeah, I think that there's this like, sometimes we're sort of in this double bind, right? Because we live under a system that for us and for a lot of our clients is not designed for us to live in, right? And
Mhm.
so sometimes when we go further into like our individual identities, we're going away from some of our cultural touch points, and sometimes we go further into our culture touch points, and sometimes we're losing some of our individual identities, in the sense that I mean, an example would be, right, that there are a lot of people of color like you and me, they're also like quite conservative, right? And
Mhm.
so sometimes these religious institutions are really important cultural places. And then sometimes in terms of queerness and some of these other things, those might not always feel good. But in some way, it feels like there are parts of yourself in both of these things. And it's difficult to navigate. And I think when talking about like our work here, right? Like you said, there's not like some one right way to do it. I think a thing that I tell like on consult calls is that like I work with people that often have like non-traditional relationships. What does that mean? It just means like if it's working for you, cool. If it's not, also cool, right? If getting married would make you feel great, then get married. If getting married would make you feel miserable and trapped, then you don't need to do that. If
Mhm.
you want to fall in love and live in separate apartments, then you like it, then I don't have a problem with it. And I think when we talk about like, I guess, pathology and stuff, when we're talking about diagnosis and all these things, the question is it causing distress in your life? If not, if you say it's a problem for you and you are not having adverse effects in other realms of your life because of it, then I guess it's not a problem.
Yeah.
If it is causing problems in your life and distress, then I guess it is a problem, regardless of what we think it should be or shouldn't be.
I'm just letting your thoughts simmer here, and my brain is really coding what you're saying here as like ways that we might facilitate what is a healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
What does not being in a toxic relationship look like? What are some variables, some factors that we're considering here,
Mm-hmm.
including relationship styles, right? You're kind
Mm-hmm.
of touching on maybe some of the stuff around that some of our clients might feel like they have to participate in, a lot of like heterocentric relationship
Mm-hmm.
style stuff, marriage, some values that were maybe pushed onto some clients that just don't really actually
Mm-hmm.
hold any water for them.
And some people might really love those roles or
Mm-hmm.
love that type of
Right.
power exchange, right?
Mm-hmm.
More power to you. The question is, does it actually work for you, or do you wish you were a person that it does? Because if it doesn't, then we have this friction where something is having to be eroded to make room for this.
Mm-hmm.
That you're not able to show up as your whole self or be honored as your whole self.
Going back to like heterocentric views too, and I'm not like pushing those aside. I'm just kind of eliciting them as things that are motivators, or undercover motivators, things that are present that sometimes are very implicit in the way that we see the world, and we're just trying to make them more explicit so that you can have a choice, have some agency. And I think in the topic of toxicity, abuse, control, there's also in the way that folks might navigate trying to get care within the systems that are available to them. There's even a heterocentric lens to how abuse is looked like or considered. It's a genderized lens. It's this
Mm-hmm.
lens that is kind of embedded in the systems of care. Immediately, I'm thinking about how folks who might be wanting to leave or navigate away from an abusive relationship, a lot of the what's the word here, like this doesn't seem like the right word here, but like validated or upheld systems to do that is through like a legal route. But even in the legal route, there's like a lot of genderized stuff that comes within it, where it's like, oh, a man is this role and a woman is this role. Like there's this implicit like power and control dynamic already built in gender, even when it comes to power, control, abuse, who is on the receiving end of abuse, who is the abuser.
Yeah, and there are definitely these power dynamics when it comes to, like you're saying, legal issues, because we kind of have a sense, gender, race, etc., what power status of what the police and what judges fit and what they see themselves in and what they don't, right? What they have bias towards and what they don't. But even in the social services, there's also these kinds of issues in terms of what shelters are available and for who and for what. I mean, even if you are looking at like women's shelters for women, you're able to bring your children unless the boy is above basically puberty age, but that's still your child. So you can't leave and go to a shelter if you have a boy who's like 14. What are you going to do? Do you have other daughters? I mean, these create like a lot of difficult dynamics. I mean, what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to leave your child in that situation, or now that child is being seen as a risk factor to bring here? So these create really impossible situations for folks, even when we're talking about like the shelters that we know do exist and are like more available than the others.
Hey, Renee popping in just for a minute to say thank you for listening. We really hope you are enjoying the conversation today. Any chance you have to rate, review, subscribe, and share with a friend makes a huge impact, and we greatly appreciate it. If you have extra bandwidth and want to support the show even further, you can go to mytherapistisout.com and click the donate button. Any donations from $5 a month to a one-time donation makes a huge difference for us. We're a little self-published podcast, so any extra dollar helps. Again, go to mytherapistisout.com and hit donate. Now back to the show.
I know that we're like honing in on like real life examples or what it looks like in real life to even try to navigate care outside of or away from something like a abusive relationship or a traumatic experience. Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, what else? Like what signs, patterns, what are some other considerations as people are trying to navigate through systems and trying to find care or support?
I mean, I think one of the biggest things that is very common in abusive relationships for a reason is isolation, right? Typically, a lot of times a wedge is sort of driven. Maybe you don't have your own work and work relationships. Maybe there's some wedges between your family, maybe between friends and so on, so that you're kind of dependent on this one person. And so whether we're leaving or staying or recovering after leaving or whatever stage that we're in, I think typically there is a need for more social support than we have. Like those are really big protective factors. So having people that you can call and that care about you and are available to you emotionally and are willing to listen to you and validate you and consider you and show up for you. I do really think that one of the biggest antidotes to toxic love is healthy love, you know?
Yeah.
Like I've worked with a lot of like families that, have been system involved. They've had DCFS cases and stuff like this. And a lot of times, you have a parent who they had a really tough childhood and they felt really exposed. And so they want to protect their kid in some way. And so they're very strict with them, very controlling with them. They get upset with them easily and these kind of things because they think that they can prepare them for the next thing and protect them for the next thing. But what unfortunately happens is that child learns that the person who loves me also hurts me. The person who loves me also limits me. The person who loves me also doesn't listen to me and value what I have to say. And so it's actually creating more risk for them to end up in toxic relationships than healthy ones, even though the whole point was to protect them from that. And when I'm in those situations, sort of what I say, it's like, if you love them in such a way that something that was unhealthy would feel suspicious, that's actually the muscle memory that we're trying to build. Like,
Mhm.
when we have this one person who's telling us we're worthless and all these things that feels true, what about adding in more relationships that do not make us feel that way? That starts to feel more strange. We start to have a better ability to calibrate that maybe there's something wrong there, because we have the comparison of what being loved and accepted feels like.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. It's like building that muscle with that. I mean, this is all clicking on my end too.
Hmm.
On like what the work can also look like for folks, like building this muscle of like, okay, this is not what I want, and this is actually what I want. This is what community looks like. This is what support is supposed to feel like.
Hmm. And that's the healing part of therapy, right? It's the relationship. It's having a relationship with someone who believes what you have to say is important.
Hmm.
Like, we model that in the hopes that that can be replicated.
Yeah. No, not to get too lost into like terminology here, but like working through internalization work here, especially in like childhood experiences, and then navigating outside of and trying to find more healthier dynamics for you. Or, well, you said a word that really my brain is having a hard time remembering, but it was the opposite of toxic love. It's not love.
Healthy.
Healthy love,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, so I did say it correctly. Cool, cool, cool. But just like working through like internalized messaging around like deservedness, what you deserve, what should be happening, like making those things more explicit, from this like maybe very implicit, very quiet in the shadows space that someone else put there, but we still operate under unconsciously.
Mm. I think about sometimes people, what is it to love someone when they're in a toxic relationship, right?
Mhm.
Your role as a friend or
Totally.
a family member, when someone's going to something that hurts them and they're going back again and again, and uh, they're changing, they're disappearing from you in a certain way. What do you do in that role to manage your own, like, frustration, activation, pain, to be able to try to stay in relationship with them so they don't become too isolated
Yeah.
too?
Yeah. I think there's no perfect way to show up in that way, but there are certain things, certain variables that do support, or that are, what's the word here? Have some sort of positive impact, which is
Mhm.
validating, listening to what people are saying, what your friends are saying, validating their experiences. And I know it can be really hard trying to convince them of something different, but just something like a reminder of like, yeah, that makes sense. And it's also not normal for you to always feel like you're walking on eggshells when it comes to
Mhm.
XYZ abusive, insert abusive pattern or dynamic here, right? And so it's like we're
Mhm.
validating, we're not shutting down, we're creating space for them to be listened, and also offering them something that isn't saying that they're wrong, but maybe allowing them to have some kind of reference point, another reference point to consider.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so safety planning
Mhm.
can also be part of what showing up and supporting someone in a toxic relationship can look like.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's always fair to say, if you're worried or if you're concerned, to show up with the care that you have for someone. But how do we do that without getting in a power struggle where
Hmm.
I can't talk to you anymore because of this? And nobody has perfect control over that, but I mean, that is sort of the thing that we're trying to thread, which is like, I'm here for you and I care about you, and this is really worrying me,
Totally.
and I still want to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. Consistency. Yeah. And it does require a certain amount of taking care of yourself, to show up for a friend or a loved one that you know is going through and is part of maybe a really toxic relationship, one that's centering abuse, control, and power. So
Yeah.
making sure that you're also taking care of yourself as you're showing up in that way.
To acknowledge something doesn't mean to endorse it.
Mm-hmm.
And
100%.
if that means that, the boundaries we have there for us so that we can stay in relationship, and if that means taking a step back so that you don't have to take 10 steps back,
Mm-hmm.
uh, knowing, okay, we love this person, we don't want them to be isolated. The hope is that this is not forever. And this is the amount that I can manage without uh, being so activated myself that I probably will not be able to do it anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that sentence right there. Oh, my brain is feeling it really wanted to stick and gravitate towards the way that you summed that up. What was it? To validate something isn't to endorse it. I think you said it in a lot more powerful words here, but yeah, and I think that's so important too, especially in like just considering the folks that we might see and how this might show up in like our client population. Like we work with queer folks, we work with folks who are in the LGBTQ plus community, and there's like considerations here around why someone might even stay in a relationship. There's for some folks, I'm not saying for all, but there does exist this term that we might more readily use in some of these power and control dynamics, which is intimate partner violence, where the consideration here for some folks is, well, my partner is my access to a larger and broader community, right? And so like showing up, like having a queer informed lens to some of the dynamics at play here is useful, especially if you're also like not surprised. I'm not just a therapist. Like I'm out in the world also supporting friends too. I'm also considering those things too, where it's like broadening the way that someone might conceptualize community to and access to community.
And it's hard because like our relationship with our government is an abusive relationship, right? So that layer is on top, and then the things model that, where like in our society, right, like the rights that we have, the freedoms that we have, like all of these things, not everything's given equal value. And so you start, often in the queer world, there's a place, it's the closet, right? We start in this world of secrecy and isolation. We begin there because of the abusive relationship we have with society. And then that lends itself to exacerbate abusive relationships that we have with others, because it's already there's already the pressure to put it in these containers where there's not a lot of sunlight and there's not a lot of views and there's not a lot of there's a lot of scarcity, there's a lot of feeling inadequate, right? Like all of these things that happen in this formative time of coming out and finding your identity. And so it can feel like this is sort of normal because I'm made to feel like this by society or by the news or by whatever. So it's a difficult life wherein even you can still have a healthy relationship and have a really unhealthy relationship with your relationship because of the shame and the homophobia and the secrecy and the isolation and the things that we end up carrying because of the things around us.
Yeah, that's really well said.
I'm thinking about the term we're using, like intimate partner violence, includes this word violence. And I think a lot of people feel that they're not in an abusive relationship, or that they're not going to have the effects of an abusive relationship if there's not violence, talking about hitting, right? Things like that. When in fact, some of the bigger components, a lot of times, whether it's from your family of origin or the one that you're in, is not just what is present, but also what is missing, because those are the protective factors that help us manage and process difficult stuff. And so, sometimes if you're a child or an adult, whatever, it's not just this person harmed me, but also they never made repair with me. They never let me know that I was safe again. I had no one to go to who would listen to me, who would offer me care. Those missing pieces are what makes the harm really sticky, and their effects are quite harmful themselves, right? It's not really that far apart.
You strung that along really well. Yeah. And I'm like thinking about this idea that I know that I floated out earlier, this question of like, what was I left carrying that isn't mine?
Mm.
And also that can also be maybe rephrased like, what wasn't, was what wasn't taught to me, that I'm also now trying to figure out like, in the, as it's absent in either my perception of myself in a relationship or of others, like how do I increase some kind of knowledge around something that I myself haven't experienced, like a healthy boundary, like healthy conflict, like navigating
Yeah.
disagreements, like all these things.
Yeah. What does it mean to have a disagreement with somebody and still feel respected? What does it mean to have an argument with somebody and not need to be convinced, to be able to accept the difference and for the person to still give respect and care, or to be able to make repair with each other?
Totally, like navigating even moments of conflict from like a space of mutual understanding versus like blame. Yeah. And all these things also, like I'm thinking about these variables and how they might even frame the way that we code something like a problem, or how we're like looking at this idea of like finding a solution, thinking about how for some folks they might feel like they have to white knuckle through certain things, because that's just how relationships are. But then part of the work is like supporting folks in understanding something like, well, incompatibility is a thing. Can be folks who you don't have to white knuckle through to stay in connection.
Right. You can have a deal breaker. It doesn't match with someone else.
Yes.
The goal of making them become what would be for you, or making yourself broken in some way to fit what would be for them, that's not a requirement, right? In order to to continue to have mutual respect, that just may not be able to sometimes, like you said, yeah, you're just incompatible. It's okay.
Good stuff here. I'm finding myself like really just sitting with a lot of these thoughts. And I know that the goal of our conversation today wasn't, we weren't going to like solve something for folks. If anything, hopefully folks listening can leave with some more thoughts to consider when it comes to all that goes into a toxic relationship, understanding that term through a different lens, getting a little bit more specific, seeing how when we're maybe trying to describe a toxic dynamic, how the examples that we have been giving kind of flesh out like what that actually means, what work in therapy can look like in leaving toxic relationships or wanting to further understand what's toxic for you, and what healthy love for you can look like.
Yeah. I think the kind of thought that I have is that a lot of times folks feel that the problem in their relationship is sort of around communication. Like there's some misunderstanding. My parents didn't know what I needed, when parents do know roughly what a child needs, right? I mean, sometimes it is not knowing, but a lot of times it is not prioritizing or not valuing or not caring. And so that can be very tempting to be like, oh, well, I just need to actually go further and explain myself more and work harder. And I think that that can just be very difficult in general in terms of being able to let go of our drive to convince somebody, or to try to force them to our side, or to try to make ourselves different and acceptable to someone. And again, I really think one of the biggest protective factors is community, is to be less isolated. And so if you have a healthy relationship, it will benefit from you having good friendships. If you have an unhealthy relationship, it will not benefit from you having good friendships. But I don't see really a negative typically for a person to have stronger family, friend, professional, other resources that tends to have mostly good things.
Yeah.
So if you don't know what this one thing is, I think sometimes instead of focusing all of your energy onto trying to answer it, see if you can build some of these other healthy resources, and then you can take a look and see how that feels to you. Does it feel better? Now there's a little bit more pressure off it. It might. Does it feel worse because it's so unmatching with the ways that you interact with other people? It might. It's just information. But try to invest, in your friendships and your communities, or have therapy, or just have spaces to talk and exist outside of people that have a stake in the outcome of your life.
Yeah, totally. Yes. These were great takeaways. I'm just to like jump onto that takeaway because I'm very pro community too. And like I think
Yeah.
friendships, community, folks that I really want to tie in even like non-traditional relationships here, something that is separate from the way that we might have been taught what these things have to look like, are like really fruitful playgrounds, sandboxes, maybe even to get a little bit clear on some of the stuff we're trying to pull apart here. So getting clear on like standards that you have when it comes to relationships, boundaries, demystifying what that means for you too in your friendships, in your intimate relationships, in your non-traditional relationships, and also for your own work to be like, ooh, do I have some expectations too that I'm still operating under that are no longer helpful? These shoulds, what they need to look like, rules, all these other little building blocks in a lot of our dynamics that sometimes we don't recognize, and sometimes really impact what goes into a toxic relationship. It builds the toxic relationship.
Yeah.
Just wanted to jump on that today.
Yeah, we're social creatures. We're made to be in a village, right? We're not made, putting all of your pressure onto the thing that's not working, and then we neglect all the beautiful flowers that we have around us. It's just always a thing that happens, and it's really tragic because that, like, it sometimes takes some intentional effort to go that way.
That part.
But I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for all of the like wonderful people in my life, that it does really protect us,
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Also grateful for you. I'm like, you part of my community.
Yeah.
And this kind of, as we were going through these takeaways, we're also setting the tone for what's coming up next. So next with Chris Raven, they're going to be diving into the significance of friendships and how to build healthy ones. And then after that is going to be Renee, an episode with our founder and CEO, Renee, who will be talking with our guest, Yinka Friedman from No Other Festival. And they're going to dive into community organizing and how to recognize red and green flags as you build your community.
Amazing. So stay tuned. And here is your queer moment of joy.
My name is Asia. I go by she, her pronouns. And my favorite moment of queer joy is going to queer-based events that like House of Yes has or Poppy Juice in Brooklyn has. So those are my favorite moments. Check them out.
Hi, my name is Maddie. I use she, her pronouns. And a moment of queer joy in my life, I think it's every day because my family accepts I'm queer and my workspace is very queer and they're very accepting that I'm queer. So I think every day is a moment for queer joy for me.
Thanks for joining us. If you're in California and looking for a therapist, visit our website at openspaceTherapyCollective.com and book a free intro call with one of our therapists. If you're enjoying My Therapist Is Out, please rate, review, and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. You know somebody who could use a little extra dose of queer community?
Send them one of your favorite episodes of My Therapist Is Out and help our collective grow one listen at a time. My Therapist Is Out is an open space therapy collective podcast, and our podcast editing is done by Rachel Peltzer and Smash and Grab Studio. We'd love to hear from you about today's topic, so email us at info@openspacetherapycollective.com. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Open Space Therapy Collective. Thanks for listening.